Welcome back, my little wine introverts. This is still Xenia and my Introvert Wine podcast. So, this is going to be a solo episode of just myself. As I promised, every fifth episode is going to be a solo episode of me kind of trying to recap on some things, share some news and learnings. I'm grateful to all the speakers who have participated in the previous episodes for their insights and many educational points, well, for me at least. And I hope they sparked curiosity on certain moments for you and kind of motivated you to investigate further. So I'm very happy actually that this podcast has already reached more than 500 downloads, which is an incredible result because when I started, I didn't know what to aim and what were the statistical goals and aims. So I'm learning in process, not only in terms of the topics I want to cover, but also the part of the content creation life, like managing schedules, inviting speakers, investigating different platforms, monitoring ratings, statistics. This is all very fun, as well as editing sound and music, which I do myself, and I know I am very well aware that it's not ideal, but also I feel like we have advanced a lot in quality and will continue to do so versus where I've started. So thank you all, and I would really appreciate, this is the moment for me to ask you to leave a rating or a review or both on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. That would mean the world to me. And also it will help to reach other listeners and promote this podcast. And what's new is that it's also available on YouTube under Introvert Wine Podcast, the same name everywhere. So you can also subscribe and get notifications when a new episode is out. And as I said, I am incredibly grateful to all of you for the support. Thank you. So today's topic is communicating wine or wine communication. It is funny enough when I was thinking about this topic because it's something that I do and something that is very close to me and I've studied it a lot. I have a lot of examples, experience, and I'm sincerely very much interested in it overall. I have found myself into not direct discussion, but many relatable topics and publications regarding wine communication recently in this year, particularly in the situation we face now. And maybe it happens when you're really focused on something and you're looking for some examples or articles or opinions, you're gonna find them more often maybe, or they are on the surface when you're really researching some topic. But it was funny enough. So one of the examples was a podcast of Areni Global on communication, wine communication. I'm not sure if it's already out. I hope it is. So you can listen to their podcast as well. They have an interesting lineup of experts discussing wine communication. So they are stating that yes, we face the decline in wine consumption, and this is proven by OIV State of Viticulture World numbers for 2023. If you haven't studied them, go check. It's available on OIV website, totally free. You can read it. It's very curious, very interesting trade. It gives comparison to previous years. So wine consumption has been declining for a period now, and of course depending on the year it's gonna be more or less bigger number or smaller number, but there is a steady decline for several years already. And in production too, in 2023, which kind of balanced the supply and demand of wine, so there's no overstocking and now no dumping of prices, which is kind of good for the producers as well, maybe not so great for the wine consumers. So because we have a joke that if it's a good vintage, the prices will go up because it's a good vintage and everybody want this vintage. But if it's a bad vintage, the prices will also go up because there's not enough. So in any case, wine consumers, maybe this is bad news, but it's also old news that wine will only get more expensive. But also the take that Areni Global has is that we need better wine communication to popularize wine, to kind of make it sexy again, to attract consumers, to return consumers who have left us for beer or, I don't know, no alcohol. and kind of try to return them to wine consumption again. It has been widely promoted, and there are some scholarships that appeared, for example, under IWS, that they have a dedicated scholarship, a travel bursary for wine communicators. I think that's something new. I don't remember seeing it over the years. So Arini kind of says that maybe that's the trend, that there are more focus on wine communication, as we see it, we marketers see it as a tool to kind of increase the sales and boost them and return the wine consumers back into the wine consumption. That is one opinion. And the other opinion, I don't think it was a direct quote, maybe I'm wrong, but there was another post by Robert Joseph, who I admire deeply, I think on LinkedIn, who also posted an interesting thought that in terms of wine communication, that we are already communicating to those who are interested in wine and who are aware very much about wine. So they're wine lovers and wine professionals. And he has kind of exact numbers in his post, so I will not butcher them. So if you want to read his full opinion, go on LinkedIn, go check and follow him. He is admirable. He posts really fun and tricky points sometimes, which I enjoy a lot. So his example was, for example, the US market, and for the majority of consumers, I think more than 80%, the only wine communication they need is the communication that's already on the label. Like, for example, grape variety, region, year. I'm not sure about year, but that's really all the wine communication they need and they consume, and that's enough for them. And only maybe 15% or sometimes even 5%, depending on the country and maybe population, that really go and maybe follow the Instagram of the producers or read something about wine in general or go to a wine course or something like that. So it's really a very minuscule percentage of people who are we trying to create a lot of content for. And yeah, I mean, it's really how funny it works in different countries, and I'm really grateful to kind of be involved with international wine people, because I get very fun examples from different countries. So for example, in France, I faced people working in wine industry and they're sometimes not even aware of very specific details. So I did an internship in a Bordeaux winery, and a very renowned winery, second Grand Cru Classé. And we had this little fun tradition to have an apéro together once a week during the harvest, and everybody brought a bottle once in a while. So it could be champagne, or it was Porto, or something not Burgundy. Burgundy was banned. And we kind of just shared this bottle and discussed. And so for them, it was really curious that most of them had no recollection what blend champagne is, and that Porto is a blend, and how Porto is made, and which kind of grapes, classification. They didn't care a lot, and they just have this wine because they like it, and it says champagne, and that's enough information. And maybe they can know 2 or 3 producers that are comfortable for them, and that's it. Even in a wine country, that was kind of, I don't know, strange to me, specifically from people kind of within the industry. And then if we take not a wine country like Kazakhstan, we also had a running joke between sommeliers that sometimes in a restaurant a guest would ask for a bottle of Chablis, and maybe you're out of it and you're like, I'm sorry, we don't have Chablis, but I can offer you a Chardonnay from this region. And the customer would go, no, like, I want a Chablis, I don't want a Chardonnay. And you're like, yes, but... So again, like, this is very, in terms of the depth and the necessity of wine communication, it's kind of very, don't want to say kind of over thought, or that's too much pressure put on it, but I feel like between wine professionals and the people who work in wine and who understand, who are curious about wine, who can educate themselves constantly about wine, and those who consume wine, there is a big gap between how and what we say to each other. So this kind of brings me to the next question about wine communication. Does it have to be done by a professional or not specifically? For example, when what do I mean by when I say by professional? People like me or Mark Almert or Valeria Tennyson, who participated in the previous episode, they're renowned sommeliers, wine educator. They have some certifications of the highest level in sommelier. And again, are they read by wine consumers or wine professionals? Because I feel sometimes that we are communicating within our kind of bubble to ourselves. And then you have sometimes lifestyle influencers who are not only communicating about wine, for example, but it's part of the whole storytelling. And they are sometimes annoying us professionals. For example, when they go to a fancy restaurant or a resort, a wine region, and they kind of either mispronounce a name, a label, a region, or they're not aware of a specific technical detail. Like they're gonna say, oh, bring me a traditional method Prosecco, which cannot always be accurate, but those influencers can boost sales of the same Prosecco. For example, like bigger than me doing a seminar or podcast on sparkling wines or differences in sparkling wines, because it's not the same reach. So when you, I'm curious, when you, for example, just answer to yourself, when you are following a wine professional or a lifestyle influencer, who actually influences your choice in terms of wine selection and wine consumption more? Because I feel that we, those who work in wine, are a bit deformed by our knowledge of wine, and we of course gonna follow 5 people in the world of wine that we know, we trust their opinion, we know their taste, for example. And for us it's very, very important that their expertise, that their knowledge is at the same level or higher than ours, because we're snobs, we're wine snobs. Versus when I speak to normal wine consumers, like my parents, they probably are intimidated by such communicators as myself, and they find that maybe I touch very technical or very specific details that they don't need or don't want to know, and they can go on with some kind of basic information. It's going to be enough, more than enough for them. In this term, I would say, well, pick your favorite. I'm definitely not the one who's going to judge you on whoever you're following. The only thing that really can bother me is when the information is false, because in this case, since we're dealing with alcohol that can be and is harmful, so even though we're not doctors or surgeons, I do encourage you to get your information from kind of reliable, well-known source that you trust, as you would do perhaps with other vital information, like I said, doctors. Because overall, the availability of information on the internet has kind of blurred our perception, not only in terms of wine, but overall, what is fake and what's not. So it's very difficult sometimes to kind of distinguish that. But as I said, pick your sources that you trust and verify some details with them. And you actually just need to enjoy following the sources you like. I feel what's very interesting as well to discuss is that the ways of communication have also shifted. If you think about magazines, books, all the printed materials, I think they're losing their importance and their coverage. So a brand may now maybe think twice, as they can choose to invest perhaps in a page ad in Wine Spectator, or bring, for example, 5 sommeliers to a vineyard trip. It can be easily the same pricing, but very different outcome. And in terms of different ways of communication, it's really fun because, I mean, there are so many different strategies and goals and budgets that you can experiment with, and you can see how it works in real life if you pay attention. For example, the brands like, I don't know, Barefoot, Yellowtail, 19 Crime, use TV, radio, billboards, very, very broad coverage, and maybe not targeted at wine lovers, wine connoisseurs. Versus, for example, fine wines, because they're very peculiar where they appear and who they target. So they will be in way smaller and defined communication that is really targeted at maybe wealthier or more refined wine lovers, wine consumers. So it's, yeah. I mean, I have a lot of respect to all of those brands who manage their online presence carefully because they're modern and also they're professional. And I have a lot of respect to those who are having a lot of online communication because online rules the world now, let's admit it. It's instant, it can be really cheap, but there are way more risks, and it also needs investment to do it well that not a lot of brands and companies realize, sadly. And the main difference, the main kind of bonus for me, that it's a dialogue more than anything else, and it's not one-way communication like a magazine ad. So here are both benefits, like more loyalty with your audience, stronger connections, but there are also more risks, like you can get really easily cancelled, or can maybe have a lot of critique over a miscommunication or a mistake. And also, whatever works for the brand, it's their budgets and their strategy. I will never smirk over a rosé wine commercial featuring a swimming pool because it's hitting all the criteria it aims for, like, let's be honest. And maybe the only thing in wine communication which is a total no for me is the sexualization of commercials. I've been in Italy recently in April, and I think many of us who were there at either Vinitaly or Italian Wine Ambassador course, when we walked to the location, we've seen this poster of a lady in a certain state of nakedness posing with a bottle of wine. I don't remember, I think it was, I'm not going to shame anybody, I don't remember the brand, but I think it was posted multiple times by a lot of colleagues. So that was really very old school and humiliating for me, and I really thought we're way past that in wine communication, so probably that's a big no for me. But whatever, again, hits your target and audience and your strategy and your budgets and is not harming anyone, go for it. I mean, that's the communication that's going to find your consumer. And also, if you look at the examples of different brands and regions, how they do the communication, it's also interesting how they connect it with perhaps not only the consumer but also the country brand. And it's a topic I'd really want to maybe talk in a future episode. I just came back from Vivinum in Vienna, and if you know Austrian wine, if you follow them, you know how they built their image from a very bad place in 1980s to the quality perception Austrian wine has now. And for me, it's really an example of success story, because nobody's ideal. But for me to build this very consistent image of a country brand and wine brand, that takes a lot of work, a lot of consistency, a lot of investment, of course. But it kind of shows as well that it's possible to change your image through wine communication if you do it consistently, and of course as well if your product answers the criteria and is actually an example of this quality. So yes, Austrian wine definitely for me is a great example of wine communication in all aspects. And maybe one last thing about wine communication is also not only the platforms or the resources, but also the means how you do that. So also what's curious to see is how the brands, the regions create communication. They can do it either by themselves. If it's a smaller winery, they can use an agency if it's a bigger one, or maybe a freelancer, just one person who's gonna create the strategy for them. All of it works. All of it I've seen in different examples, and you can, I mean, easily envision that bigger brands that has presence in different markets all over the world, they would love to work with an international, also a bigger agency that can adapt and bring on board specialists that know certain markets, have expertise in different channels of communication. When you're perhaps a smaller winery and you don't have resources to have an agency or even a full-time employee, you can also use a freelancer, whatever works for you, that hits your, well, is consistent with your goals and strategy. And again, here it's up to you to decide what level of the expertise you want, because as I said, depends what is your product and to whom you're communicating this product. Because if you are maybe a very respected, very high level, very expensive brand, the expectations of your communication has to be on point. Like, you're gonna be judged by so many criteria, versus again, if you are a Provence Rosé, maybe the depth of expertise and knowledge in your communication should be and can be different. And that's all fun about wine communication. There are so many aspects about it, and I hope you enjoyed a little course, a little very brief, very express course in wine communication. So yeah, as a conclusion, probably after all of this analysis and examples and talks, I'd say that you are very likely to stick to the communication, to the brand, to the wine region that you like, that resonates with your values and beliefs. So even if I'm saying that some communication is better or smarter or super innovative or creative, it's unlikely to persuade you to switch to that brand unless you have this connection, this loyalty, this awareness. Of course, there are people who are disciplining and educating themselves on changing their habits, their routines. This is very difficult, and this is not natural to our habit, and that requires a lot of motivation and exercise. And of course, I believe some of you can do that, but it's not humanly natural and easy just to switch from day to another day. Now, when wine producers and specifically marketing and sales team face challenge to sell the wine, and I'm afraid the prices will only go up, judging by the micro and macroeconomic reasoning, and also competition from beer or lower or non-alcoholic option. The issue is not only the lack or not sufficient communication, but this global context and competition. And there is no one single solution to this situation, however much we discuss it between wine professionals. Well, this is the situation we already find ourselves in. But again, what I truly believe in wine communication, that when it's very customized and very specific, what I mean is that whatever works for Moet and Chandon in terms of communication will not work for a small natural wine producer in Jura. So when your communication is customized and specific, honest and sincere, it will find your audience, it will find your consumers. So yeah, just be creative, work harder, and communicate wine. So thank you all for listening to this episode. As I said before, it will be really amazing if you rate and review this episode and podcast overall on any platform you're listening to it at, and it will help spreading the love of wine and improve and advocate for wine one step at a time. Regarding the future episodes, there is a very curious lineup I'm looking at in terms of chemistry of wine, worn wine, biodynamic wines, financing wine, Spanish bubble, and so much more. So stay tuned. Bye.